Okay, so we'll go ahead and get going. This is kind of a dry run. If you can tell, I'm not sitting at home. I've got Derek out here with me, and we're kind of doing a dry run to see how streaming at this location is going to work and how we can do this to make it work so that we can stream and also have an actual active meeting. So I'm going to do a couple things real quick. I'm going to transfer host duties over to Derek so that he can continue to let people in to the Zoom while I go ahead and start with the meeting stuff. So I'm going to go ahead, and so you're going to see some things, and hopefully it works. We'll find out here in just a second. So you should be host now, Derek.
Where will I see when they show up to come in the room?
They should get a window, like if somebody pops up.
Oh, okay.
It'll pop up at the top.
Okay.
You'll get a notification, kind of a deal.
All right.
So, okay, I'm going to try to share my screen here. Share screen. Desktop. Okay. Got the fine. Agenda. Okay. So I'd like to welcome everybody. Oops, I didn't change the date on this, to our February meeting. Today is the 8th.
February 8th, 2021.
February 8th,
So if I can get a
motion to call the meeting to order.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Derek, motion to
call
call
the meeting to order.
Remember, your phones are muted, so if you're online, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Chris, I don't know who made the motion. We're getting really, really bad feedback. I can't hear anything you're saying.
Okay, let me take the host
back then. Okay, Derek had his. How's that now, Corey?
Much better.
Okay. Okay, Derek had to mute himself because when I made him host, he came unmuted. So Derek made a motion to open the meeting. I need a second.
I'll second.
Okay. Was that Corey?
Yes.
Corey seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
So we got a little bit of old business to cover. It's still hard to do motions and stuff via Zoom. So if you have any kind of discussion or anything like that, you'll have to unmute yourself. And probably from here on out, we'll just take a nay vote. So if anybody is in objection, we'll take a nay vote. Ohio State Beekeepers Association affiliation. Bruce, have we done anything with that?
We're getting together to work on it this coming week.
Okay, perfect. If you need me for anything, let me know. I've got some time this week.
I need you to write up a history. I need you to write up a history of things. I got to pull that email out again and look.
Okay. Hopefully we'll have that together soon and get that off to Ohio State Beekeepers Association. I got a notification today that for affiliated clubs, Ohio State Beekeepers Association is waiving the traveling speaker fee for up to 2 speakers via Zoom. So we can have 2 speakers do 2 different topics this year via Zoom for our meeting, and that would save us the speaker fee. So that would be 2 free speakers we'd be able to get for Zoom meetings. So. Next order of old business, the election closed yesterday at noon. We had 100% for the ballot for our officers as Corey Ruby for secretary, Derek Gibson for vice president. Nobody voted against the ballot, so that's closed. And our officers, I guess I don't know, we don't really have a swearing in ceremony, but our officers are in place for the 2021 year. Do we need to do anything else with that, Bruce?
Yeah, Chris, before we move on to that, we need a motion on the OS. Well, I guess we don't really need a motion for that. Never mind.
No, we don't need a motion. We don't need a motion for that because that was just an update.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay. So
To
auditing
answer your
committee, we're still
question, Chris, no, we don't need to do anything. We're here. As a reference, next year we ought to be doing this in December.
And do we want to take a motion to accept the result of the election? Chris?
Yeah.
I don't think that's needed, Corey.
What is that now?
They were red something and they had glue on them. Wait, can I try it? Yes. And you're running out of battery. Yes, I am.
Did we lose the link to the meeting?
I don't know. It looks like Chris is having trouble with something.
Okay. I don't have a video. At least
I
you're-
got,
at
I
least you
got
have
Bruce.
that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it appears for all that don't have a video going that Chris is having some technical problems. So now, Bruce, I heard you say something, but I didn't make it out. You said you do not think that we need a motion to accept the election results?
I'm not a parliamentarian, but an election is an election. The results are what they are. I guess what I'm saying is I think everybody spoke their peace of mind by voting.
That's fine.
Can you guys hear me?
I can hear Derek.
Yes.
Okay, just bear with us a minute. He's having some technical difficulties here.
Well, I was gonna say, Derek, just let him use your phone. We can see him, but let him use your phone.
Yeah, that worked.
Well, I think I
got
got it worked out.
Can you guys hear
Can
me?
you guys hear me okay? It shows you with your check, check, check.
There you are.
Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Got you.
Sorry about that. Having a little bit of technical difficulty. You guys could hear me, but I was having a hard time hearing, so I was trying to do something different. That's one of the reasons we wanted to kind of do this dry run and do this evening, so that next week or next month we'll have all this worked out and it won't be such a big deal. So, the auditing committee, we're looking for somebody to do auditing of the books. I didn't have any notes on that from the last meeting. Did we find somebody for that, or did we decide?
Chris, I thought we'd figured out somebody was gonna do that, but I looked at my notes and I didn't see anything on it.
Okay.
Did you have anything, Corey, on it?
Yeah, that's why I'm going to check. I want to check the whatchamacallit there.
I don't think we had anybody.
Minutes. I uploaded the minutes. Maybe. I know I did.
The only volunteers I recall we got last meeting were for Youth Hive.
Yeah, we had Gene and Dan Black for Youth Hive.
I thought we also had Corey's wife was gonna do the newsletter articles and stuff too.
The newsletter, yes.
Auditing committee, we according to the minutes, we need at least one person, and there was no one currently as of the meeting on 1/11. So
Okay.
we are still looking for someone to serve. We need at least one person on the auditing committee.
If you want, I can audit it.
Is that Craig?
Yeah.
Okay. Chris, you want to take a vote?
Any motion? We need a motion to accept Craig as the auditing committee to audit the books. If we can get a motion for that.
I'll make the motion.
Okay,
Second.
I'll
Bruce,
second.
Who seconded it?
Bruce and Gene, both second.
Bruce, thank you. Okay. Any objections? Motion carries.
Okay. Standing business approval of last meeting minutes. I looked over the minutes today. They were accurate. We don't have them here. I can bring them up. I think we should bring those up, Bruce, or just accept them as they stand.
Derek's got to turn off his phone again on his.
It was
speaker.
unmuted.
Yeah, we're getting feedback. I can read the minutes, and they're on your Google Drive if you want to present them to everyone, Chris.
Yeah, I've got them up here where we looked through them. Just real quick, nominations were Derek and Corey for secretary and vice president. We needed one person for auditing committee. We approved last meeting minutes, treasurer's report from Bruce. We went over the budget. Youth Hive will likely be much lower. Hopefully membership will increase. 2021 officers, we went with the email platform. Everybody should have got an email about officers. Guest speakers, we've got one guest speaker scheduled for April. I'm going to try to book, now that the OSBA has opened up the traveling speakers, I'm going to try to book at least one of the traveling speakers for one of our meetings, and that will be free to the club. Gene Elliott and Dan Black. Dan Black emailed me after the meeting about helping with the Youth Hive program. So Gene Elliott and Dan Black, I've got to get with both of them. I'm going to send them the information hopefully this week. We talked about an extractor for a raffle item and then also a club raffle, but we didn't move any on that. So that was kind of our old business. A motion to accept the minutes.
I motion.
Okay, Craig motions.
Second.
Gene seconds.
Any objections?
Any opposition or any nays? Okay, motion carries. Treasurer's report. I'll bring this up on the screen so everybody can see it. So far, and I've got to get with Bruce because I've got additional dues here with me that I was going to give to him this evening, but we've deposited $240 worth of dues. Since our last meeting, we've had no expenses. So at last report, we had $813.80 in our account. Current balance is $1,053.80. And our projected expenses for this year is $1,000. Any updates on the treasurer's report, Bruce?
No, sir.
Okay. And I've got a bunch of stuff that I need to go through that has come in the mail in the last few days that I haven't had a chance to go through as far as dues. So I'll get with you maybe later this week and we'll work that out.
Sounds like a plan.
New business. new business, I didn't get a chance to get with Gene or, like I said, Dr. Black. Dan Black also volunteered to talk to
Chris,
them
we
about
need
the
to-
program and see where we need to go. I also need to get with Gail at the extension office and find out when 4-H projects are due. It's usually around the 1st of April, so we need to get that information out to them fairly soon. So I'll get with Gene and Dan. I've been emailing back and forth this evening with Dan. So we'll get together with the three of those. We might do just a quick Zoom meeting with myself, Gene, and Dan, and talk about that. So
Before we get moving too far along, we need to do a motion on the treasurer's report, Chris.
oh, I'm sorry, I forgot.
It's all right. I'll make the first motion.
Okay. Motion to second.
I'll second it.
It was
Okay,
that Craig?
seconds.
Yep, that's Craig. Crazy Craig.
Yes. Any objections? Motion carries.
So at this point in time with the Youth High program, there's nothing to vote on. Hopefully we'll have some more information at our next meeting or around in 3 weeks at the 1st of March. Any other new business?
Hey, Chris, this is Craig. When you get the information on the Zoom costs, I'd be interested to know the reason being. I'm currently working on app developments where it might be cheaper for us to develop an app for a phone and do the meetings that way,
Okay.
just via an app. And the app, whenever you posted things, could actually do push notifications on a phone and stuff like that. So,
Okay. The thing with Zoom is you've got people like Bruce that don't have high-speed internet access that call in via telephone. So that's one advantage of the Zoom for them is they can, and plus we can record this. So I'm recording this now. I've got a couple members that I'll post this later on that they can watch it, especially the education part of it. So.
I understand. What I'm looking at is the same thing with the app. You can post recorded stuff. You can have the audio that can replay. You can be interactive, everything. So just let you know.
Might have to look at that then. Hopefully this will be the
I'm-
last
I'm
year we have
I'm
to do
actually-
Zoom. Hopefully coronavirus will die off and we can get back to normal.
Yeah, I'm actually doing it for church right now. We're going to create apps on both the Apple, Android, and both Roku TV and Apple TV.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get with you about it. I was
Okay.
going to stop by your house the other day when you were out weed eating, but I decided not to. I didn't want to interrupt you. You look busy.
Sorry to interrupt.
That's okay. That's a good thought. So, any other new business? So do we want a motion to close the business meeting and move on to education?
Make a motion.
Derek makes a motion.
I'll second it.
Second,
Okay, Randy seconds and Bruce seconds.
Motion carries 6:54 PM.
Okay. Wow, what happened? That wasn't planned. There it goes. Okay, can everybody see my slides okay? I know Bruce can't, so.
I can see it.
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay, so I want to talk tonight about late winter inspections. I was out today doing hive inspections. I usually try to knock my late winter inspections out towards the end of January. And to me, late winter inspections are a pretty important part of my beekeeping. It lets me know where I'm headed in the spring, but it also gives me the first look into the hive, so I know kind of what to expect in a few weeks and what I need to think about as I begin to prepare for the season. So why do them? Why would you want to open your hive in the middle of winter? My big thing is one, I want to know how many dead outs I've got, how many hives am I going to have to replace through either splits, or if you have to purchase bees, you need to know if you're going to have to plan for a purchase. So I'm looking for dead outs as one of the things. The next thing I'm doing is I'm seeing the progress of spring buildup. If you got my last email in the email chain, I talked a lot about calendar and how my calendar kind of is a little bit different than the calendar hanging on my wall, that I'm looking around for in nature to try to figure out what's going on and where my bees are going to be going. So I'm looking for my spring buildup to see where they're at in that buildup. I'm double checking my remaining food stores. Bees don't starve to death between November and the end of January. They starve to death from February to March. And it's not because they don't have a ton of food. My bees still have quite a bit of food on them. It's because they're starting to raise brood and use that food up at a faster pace. If they need emergency food stores, I'm going to go ahead and add them now. And I'm going to feed pollen substitute if you want to feed pollen substitute. So dead outs, it's a fact of life. We all lose bees. If you look at the average national losses, we're at anywhere from 30 to 50% year after year of average winter losses. So it's just a fact of beekeeping. You're gonna lose bees. So I take time whenever I find a dead out to look over the hive in detail. I want to figure out. I want to kind of do an autopsy. I want to look for clues as to why they died. If you have a dead out and you're in Gallia County, please call me. I will absolutely gladly help you go through your hive and try to figure out why your bees died. As much as this is a problem and it's not a good thing, but it's also a great learning opportunity. I learn more from my dead hives than I do from my hives that make it through winter, because I can learn what I did wrong going into winter. The other thing I do is if I've got a dead out, I evaluate the comb for reuse in the spring. Is the comb something I can reuse in the spring? Is it valuable to me? Or do I need to think about getting foundation and frames ready? The other thing I can do is I can evaluate leftover honey. I've got 2 dead outs that have probably 100 plus pounds of honey in each hive, and those hives died through the winter. So do I harvest that honey, or do I hold that honey back for use in other hives? How do I manage that honey? What do I need to do to protect that honey? This time of year, it's cold enough. I don't have to worry about hive beetles or wax moths. So basically all I do is I put a piece of window screen over all the entrances and just let it be. And then I'll pull out what I want to use in other hives in the spring, and then I'll harvest the rest of it. So I usually go through and evaluate and separate it by box, what I'm going to do with that different honey, whether I'm going to use it in another hive or if I'm going to harvest it. This is one of my dead outs that I came across today. As you can see, the queen is right there. Very, very small population. But as I start looking over the bees, if you can see the picture, you can notice a few things. Anybody see anything out of place in that picture?
You got mites.
I got mites. That hive had a really, really low population. And on the low population, I can see at least 3 mites on there. If you look, there's one on the queen right beside her dot. There's one on the bee to the left of her, right in the middle of its back. And just down below the queen, there's one on the abdomen of one of the bees. And if you look all the way to the far left, you can see one over there just on the edge of the comb. So obviously that was probably a mite death. It still happens, and it's something that we have to deal with. You'll have to look at your treatment schedule. If your treatment schedule worked, or if you're like me and you don't treat, you're still going to lose hives because of mites. I lose about 10 to 12% of my hives every year. I'm at 11% right now, based off the number of hives that I've lost to this point. I'm happy because I'm beating the national average, and that's my goal, is to do better than the national average. But there's other clues that you can look for queen failures. If you have a hive that's completely empty, can you look for, there's different signs that you can look for. I'll pull some of these larvae out and look at them to see if there's any kind of signs of foul brood or anything like that, chalk brood, anything like that going on. So take your time, do your hive autopsies, and if you've never done one, like I said, give me a call. I'll gladly come out and do a hive autopsy with you. It's not that hard to do. It only takes a few minutes, and you can actually learn quite a bit from seeing what happened to your bees. The other
Is your
big
bee
thing
still
is winter or spring buildup. I open the lid. I don't always pull frames. Sometimes I will pull frames, but I'm looking at how big is the cluster. Is the cluster the size that it needs to be, or is it too small? A too small cluster doesn't bother me nearly as much as a cluster that's too big, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But I'm looking at the size of the cluster, because as soon as you pull that lid off, you're going to be obvious. It's going to be pretty obvious to you how big the cluster is. Is the cluster size appropriate for the amount of food stores remaining? A smaller hive should have a smaller cluster, and a larger hive should have a larger cluster. That's just because there's more food stores available, and the bees will adjust to that. The other thing I'm looking for is the cluster at the top of the box. I think that this is kind of a myth or a fallacy. If you read a lot of the beekeeping literature, it says if your cluster's at the top of your box, then your bees are almost out of food. I'm going to show you some pictures here that are proof that the bees are at the top of the box, but they've still got plenty of food in them. So I don't think that that's a truth. I think there is some truth to it, that if they make it all the way to the top of the box, they could be running low, but it doesn't mean that they're completely out of stores. So that's why you have to be able to look in your box and see what's going on. The other thing I look for is how active are their bees. Today when I was out checking hives, the hives, when I was opening them up first thing this morning around 9:30, 10 o'clock, when it was still 20 to 30 degrees out, they weren't very active, which I was fine with. As the day went on and as I was checking more bees, the bees became a little more active, a little more aggressive as they warmed up. But look for the level of activity. Is this what you expect? Is it too low or is it too high? If they're too active, they're going to burn up a lot more food stores than bees that are less active. But then there's also bees that are dead, which is not a good thing. But I look at the level of activity. Do they have enough activity to keep brood warm? That's another thing you can tell with the activity is are they keeping brood warm? A hive that is more active is probably warming brood, so they're not in torpor. So they're not trying to just barely keep warm. They're actually warm enough to keep everybody active and keep brood going. So this was one of the hives. This was a single 8-frame medium, and you can see the cluster size on the top of the box. So if you saw that cluster size, what would you think? Would you be concerned, or would you be happy with that cluster size? Any thoughts?
I would not be unhappy with that.
Yeah, this is a nuke. This is a smaller hive. I'm expecting a smaller cluster. Do they have enough to keep themselves warm? When you actually look down through the frames, you can actually see that that cluster is much larger than that. That cluster actually down in the frames is probably twice that size. So the other concern is how much food stores do they have? What I wish I had a pointer. Can you guys see? Yeah, can you guys see my pointer?
Yep.
So as I looked at this frame, they had eaten this area over here in honey. This entire area over here was still full of honey. So I wasn't concerned about food stores of this hive because they had only eaten about a quarter of the food stores in the hive. I actually did pull one frame out of this hive to see what kind of brood, see if there was any brood yet. And there was actually brood, and I've got a picture of it here in a minute. But they were actually raising brood, and they were actually very active. So compared that to this hive, this hive has a much larger cluster. Again, both these clusters are pretty close to the top of the box. But if you look at this, this box has two deeps. It's got the green box and the blue box, or two mediums, I'm sorry, two mediums deep. This is a huge cluster here. And these are very, very active bees. I'm more concerned about this hive starving to death than I am this hive. This hive, I think, will be fine through spring, and this hive will actually build up fairly quick. This one has actually started building up a little bit too early, and this hive I'm going to have more concerns with how they're doing. That's a pretty good sized cluster. That's a little bit larger than a basketball, which is a pretty good sized cluster for our area. Now, looking at food stores, they had worked their way from the bottom up to the top of this box, and they were actually in the process of moving over. You could tell there was bees moving over this way, and you could actually see them starting to move over towards this honey. So these warm days like we had today are actually good for these bees because they'll actually be able to shift their cluster across the frames. This hive, I will monitor it closer than the other hive because, like I said, I'm really worried that they might burn up all their stores before springtime. But that's why it's good to just pop the lid. You don't actually have to pull frames. You can tell a lot by popping the lid, looking down between the frames, and getting out in a couple minutes. And on a warm day like today that the sun's out, it doesn't really hurt the bees that much. So spring buildup. Are they rearing brood? Our bees are actually rearing brood right now. Some of my hives actually had a really nice brood pattern and quite a bit of brood. I was actually quite surprised. It's like I said, it's about on track from where I'm at every year, but some of them had a little more than others. If you don't only have a few hives, I would not recommend pulling frames and checking brood until you get a little more experience under your belt. And because there's always the possibility that you can cause a lot of chilled brood. This morning, when I first started pulling frames, it was 26, 27 degrees out. And if I would have pulled a frame of brood out, more than likely I would have caused a bunch of chilled brood. And then the next day, I'll come back in a couple of days, and there'll be a bunch of either chalk brood mummies or a bunch of dead larvae out in front of the hive, and I would have had concerns. But if you know to expect that, then that's something that you can do. But like I said, you do use caution if you're going to pull frames. Just grab one frame from the middle of the cluster, pull it out, glance at it real quick, and get it back in the hive. If you don't know
Chris?
what's going on or you don't know what to look for, I post a lot of pictures. I'll be posting these pictures tomorrow in the beekeeping group. But look at other people's pictures and what they're seeing, because you can watch. If you follow some of the Facebook groups and some of the other beekeeping groups, you can actually watch swarm season march up from the south. You can actually plan and time this out. I've been watching some beekeepers down in New Orleans, and they're actually starting to see swarm cells already in hives. They've already done some swarm prevention down there, and we can actually watch that march up through Kentucky, actually up through Mississippi, Alabama, into Tennessee, into Kentucky, and up into our area. You can also follow it up from Georgia to South Carolina and North Carolina, up into Virginia in our area. So look at what other people are posting and kind of figure out how soon that you're going to have to start looking for stuff like that. The other thing is to start looking for signs of drone brood. I saw some drone larvae today, not a lot, just a few, but they are starting to think about raising drone brood, which means spring is just around the corner, thank goodness. But there are some drone brood out there, just very, very small patches. And I've got a couple hives that carried some drones through winter that still have a few drones in the hive that they carried through winter. So that fallacy that they kick all the drones out doesn't always apply, because there are some drones in a couple of these hives.
Question.
So this is the brood rearing right here. It's kind of hard to see, but you can actually, if you look, I'll try to move my mouse here. If you look down in these cells down in here, you can actually see eggs. And as you come up into here, you see larvae. And then up here in the middle, you see cat brood. There was actually 4 frames of brood like this in this hive. And this was one of the more active hives and probably one of the larger clusters. You can see they've still got plenty of honey stores over to the edges. And then they also had probably a good 8 to 10 frames of honey left in the hive total. So that gets us on to looking for remaining food stores. Do they have enough to last 4 to 6 weeks? We've got 4 weeks probably at least until the maples start blooming. Maple sap, I don't know. I feel like at times you guys hear me talking about other things that I'm into, but maple sap is running really hard right now. And usually once maple sap starts running, you've got about a good 4-week flow of maple sap before the trees actually bloom. We're about a week and a half into a good maple sap flow. So probably about another 2.5 to 3 weeks, we're going to see the maple trees start to bloom. And that's going to be the first source of pollen and nectar. So they have enough food in there to last that long. Again, I talk about have they made it to the top of the box. Use that as a clue, not as a rule. Take a look at other things going on in your box other than just, oh, wow, they're at the top of the box, they're out of food. They may shift left or right within the box, or up or down. So don't think of just them being at the top of the box as a telltale sign of them being ready to starve to death. And then you have to look at this and you have to know, do they have enough to keep them from starving, or do I need to add something? I did add dry sugar to 2 hives today. So out of about 40 hives, I had to feed 2 of them because I was worried about them. Dry sugar is about the only thing that you can feed right now. But again, it's very important that you look at this and try to make a determination. And for the new beekeepers, it's really hard because you don't have that experience under your belt. And that's where your mentor or somebody else ask me questions. There's several other people in the club that can help you out. But go out and lift the back of your hive. Back in the fall when we had one of the meetings, I put an 80-pound bag of sackcrete in a hive and ratchet strapped it, and everybody come around and lift it up to kind of feel what a good weight on a hive feels like. And then you can take that and kind of go feel what your hives are like, and then you can use that as a comparison. So you should be able to still feel a pretty decent amount of weight on your hives when you lift the back of the hives up, but they are going to be noticeably lighter than they were in November. Same pictures because I already talked about and showed where the food was in these. So emergency food stores. If you think your bees or you're concerned about your bees starving, there's not much you can do. You only really have one option this time of year. It's too cold to feed sugar syrup. If you put sugar syrup in your hive right now, the sugar syrup will chill and the bees won't take it. The bees are smart enough to know that if they take that cold sugar syrup, it's going to chill their body and they're not going to be able to recuperate. So if you put sugar syrup in a feeder of any kind right now, they're not going to be able to take that sugar syrup. The only option you really have is dry sugar. So just straight granulated sugar from Walmart. I go up, I get the 25-pound bags, and I put about 5 pounds on each hive whenever I feed them dry sugar. The other nice thing about dry sugar is it absorbs excess moisture. We're getting ready to get into the wettest part of winter, and spring is also very wet. So anything you can do to keep moisture out of your hive is a bonus. So adding this dry sugar will help absorb moisture. The biggest thing you need to be able to add dry sugar is a shim and a piece of newspaper. A shim is just a spacer that's the same size as your hive body, and then a piece of newspaper. Now this cluster on this hive was all the way at the very top of the box. I did have to use my smoker to push them down a little bit so that I wouldn't smash the bees. I did not want to smash any bees when I put this newspaper on and put the dry sugar on. So I did use my smoker. I just gave them a few puffs of smoke. They went down between the frames. I set the sheet of newspaper on, put my shim on, and poured about 3 to 5 pounds of dry sugar. That will last them until probably early April. By the time it gets around to early April, they'll look at it as garbage and they'll haul it out. So usually around the end of March, 1st of April, I'll go through and any big chunks of sugar that are still in the hive, I'll put them in a 5-gallon bucket with a lid. I'll seal them up and I'll save them for next year. And I'll put some of those chunks on some of my other hives that I don't think that need a little bit of assistance. And I'll use those chunks as my emergency feed, and I don't have to use the newspaper. I just have to use the shim.
Chris, do you cut slits in your newspaper, or do you just
No,
put
I
the
do not.
newspaper
Some
straight
people
on?
cut slits, and some people recommend spraying the sugar with a little spritz of water from a little handheld spray bottle. I do not do either. I don't even trim the newspaper from the edges. I just leave it overhanging because the thing of it is the first rain it gets, that newspaper is going to fall away, and I don't have to worry about it. But the bees will chew up through that pretty quickly. They'll find that sugar probably in a day or two, and that sugar will start absorbing moisture from the hive almost immediately. If you've ever left sugar out on your table in a hot, humid summer in a sugar bowl with no lid on it, you'll know that it clumps up pretty quick. It'll do the same thing in the beehive. You remember the bees are down there below this breathing. It's just like when we go out with our masks on and our glasses on and try to breathe in the cold weather, we get all that fog on our glasses. That's all the moisture we're exhaling. The bees are doing the same thing. So they're exhaling moisture that's going to go straight up and get absorbed into that sugar. And that sugar is going to be pretty hard in just a matter of a couple of days from absorbing the moisture just from the bees' respiration. But no, I do not slit it. The problem I've had with slitting before is the sugar kind of rains down on the bees, and I think it creates a little bit of extra work for them trying to clean themselves. And then spritzing it with spritz of water. I'm trying to keep moisture out of my hive. Why do I want to spritz it with water and add a little bit more moisture in? That's just my opinion.
One more thing before we move off this topic. If a man didn't have shims available, he could use any kind of extra, maybe the shallow or medium, so he could put his sugar on. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, you can. I've got some 10 frame equipment that I inherited that I still use, and I don't have a lot of 10 frame shims, so I just take a 10 frame medium with me, and I can use that as a shim. You can use a deep, you can use a medium, you can use whatever you have on hand. I like the shims because I can use them for multiple different things. So I usually have a collection of them, but you can use an extra box. Just take the frames out of it and pour it right down on top, and just set the box on top, and then put your inner cover. The thing of it is you don't have to worry about them building comb this time of year. They're not going to start building comb until probably the second week of April is when they're going to have enough of a flow to start building comb. So you really don't have to worry about that extra space. If you get it off between now or between the end of March and the first or second week of April. So you got time to take care of that before they start building comb in that empty space. The other thing you can use is emergency feed. I've never used it. Is either fondant or a candy board. The fondant is the same thing that you can buy as icing. You can buy it at different stores, pre-made, or there's recipes online. And basically, it's like a hard, or I guess it's a medium soft type of icing that's easy to form. And what people will do is they'll make basically it looks like an inner cover with some extra space, and they'll force that fondant up in there, and then they'll put that inner cover on, and the bees will eat that fondant. The same thing with candy boards is you'll make essentially rock candy. You'll boil your sugar and your water, but you just won't add any kind of the flavorings. You'll boil it till it's a hard tack temperature on a candy thermometer, and then you'll pour it in what's called a candy board, which is basically it's an inner cover with no slit in it for your no handhold slit or ventilation slit. So you'll pour that in there, and it'll basically glue itself to that lid, and then you'll put that lid on there, and the bees will be able to eat that hard candy. My big thing is that's extra work. Dry sugar, all I got to do is go buy it at Walmart and take it and dump it on the hive. So I'm all about being lazy. And then Corey, I'm going to kind of rely on you a little bit about this, or anybody else that's used pollen substitutes, because I've never used them. If you're going to use a pollen substitute, now is the time to start thinking about it. They're starting to rear brood, and this is when you want to put them on. A lot of people will put them on in the fall, and there's even people who will leave them on all winter. I think, and my personal opinion and my observation is they stimulate, whenever they're on there, they stimulate brood production. I don't want these hives producing brood in the middle of winter unless they absolutely need it. So I don't want to stimulate that production. I've seen beekeepers that put pollen patties on that end up with swarms way earlier than what natural swarming occurs in their area, because the bees have just brooded up so quick because of the stimulation from the pollen patty or the open pollen that it's kind of forced them to swarm early. When it comes to pollen substitutes, you can either open feed or use pollen patties. Both are very effective. The only difference is pollen patties, you're feeding your bees for sure. Open feeding, you're feeding your neighbor's bees plus your bees. So that's one of the big differences. And the other thing is that later in the year, you want to get your pollen patties off, because pollen patties are a huge, huge attractant to hive beetles. The hive beetles love them. And open feeders are subject to mold if the pollen gets damp. If you ever drive around and you see one of Fred Burdell's yards and his contraption, it's quite interesting. I'll talk about it here in a minute. But he does that. to keep his pollen substitute from getting damp. And Fred open feeds and he uses pollen patties at the same time. So he uses a combination of both.
So with the pollen, I'm not a fan of it. I do sell it. In the wintertime, I would highly recommend not a pollen patty, but a winter patty. The big difference between a winter patty and a regular pollen patty is the winter patty is almost all carbohydrate, very little protein. And that keeps the bees from going to brooding too early. Around March is when you'd want to switch over to a traditional regular pollen patty. But we don't care for them here ourselves. I actually didn't even carry the winter ones in inventory this winter. I only ordered them for special order. So I think the dry sugar method achieves the exact same thing that a winter patty would do. And plus you're getting the moisture control. So that's our 2 cents on it.
And the other thing is there's a lot of different pollen substitutes and pollen patties out there. Do your research. Talk to other beekeepers in your area that are using pollen substitute and pollen patties and see what they're using and why they're using it. There's natural pollen substitutes that actually have real pollen in them. And then there's also pollen substitutes that have no pollen at all in them, that are just a protein base. There's the new stuff with probiotics that's supposed to be really good, much better than the regular pollen substitutes. And then there's also stuff out there with Honeybee Healthy and some other stuff in there. So you've really got to do your research to see what you want. Up on your screen, there's 2 different types of pollen open feeders. The one is a commercial, the blue one, that's a commercial open feeder. Fred uses these and he has a weather vane attachment that he has designed and built that turns with the wind to try to keep moisture from blowing in whatever side the wind is coming from. It's a pretty wild contraption, but he had such an issue, he said, with pollen getting moldy and nasty in these open feeders that he basically built these for all of his yards so that it rotates to keep part of the feeder closed that's towards the wind to keep rain and other moisture from blowing in and rotting the pollen. The second one is really easy to build. It's a small section of PVC pipe, a downspout adapter, and a cap. I think you can get these supplies at Home Depot for about $5 to build one of these. And basically you just dump the pollen substitute in and you hang it up somewhere. Some people hang these up under like an awning of a barn or something like that, or this one's hanging up on a fence post out in the middle of a field. But you want to turn these so that they're away from the primary weather direction, which is, like in this time of year, is northwest. So you would like to ideally point these southeast. You don't really need to do anything to attract the bees to this. If you have any kind of animals, whether it's chicken or cows or goats or anything else, whenever the weather's warm, you'll notice that they'll be in your feed, going through your feed, trying to collect pollen from the feed. That does not necessarily mean that your bees need fed. Bees are workers. They want to work no matter what. And when the weather's warm, they're going to go out and collect whatever they can. And if that means they're going to a bird feeder and getting the powdered cracked corn out of a bird feeder, or they're going to your chicken feed and getting it out, they're going to work. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're starving. So that's why it's always good to do these spring inspections, these late winter inspections, to see what the status of your bees are. Remember, this time of year, they haven't used any of their pollen stores. So whatever they stored in the fall, they're just now starting to use that pollen because they only need that pollen to raise brood. And like I said, right now would be the time to start thinking about getting pollen feeders out there and pollen patties out. Fred doesn't have his out. I figure after the cold of this weekend, I figure he'll have his out next week. So he's usually got his out right around Valentine's Day. So has anybody been in their bees in the last few weeks on a warm day? I really
Yes,
encourage
what
you to
was
do
that?
this. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Alan.
I'm sorry, I stepped away a minute. What did you ask? You asked a question just right before that comment, and I was
I said,
wondering what that was.
has anybody been in their bees in the last couple weeks, last 2 or 3 weeks when we had a warm day?
Yes, I have.
How were they looking?
Um, I have 3 dead outs, 4 or 5 fairly strong, a couple on the weak side on that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think it was my mic
is
control
this
was
your-
my problem.
Is this your first time? Do you do this every winter, Alan? Because I know you've been keeping bees for a few years, but or is this your first season getting in
Yes,
them
sir.
this early?
Can
Yes,
I ask a question? Can I ask a question?
Sure can, Jim. Go ahead.
Uh, you've used the term dead out. I'm not quite, does that mean that all the bees are dead?
Yeah, all the bees
Or-
are dead. Either that or there's no
'Cause,
bees in the hive. I consider.
The picture you showed had live bees in it. So that a dead out is they're all dead, right?
Yeah, dead out is all dead. This one
Okay,
is.
thanks.
Hang on. Let me get back to the pictures here. So this picture here, all these bees are dead. These bees are not
Oh.
moving. These bees are stone cold dead. There's not a live bee in that hive.
Okay, I appreciate it. I thought they were still alive. Okay.
Nope, they're dead. They were quite frozen, and on the other side of the frame, they were actually getting moldy. So
Okay, thanks.
and then this picture was a live hive. This was a living hive. This is not a dead out. A dead out is anything that there's no bees left, or the bees that are in there are dead. Sometimes when you get a dead out, the bees will end up on a frame. They'll end up stuck on the frame like this, and it'll just look like a perfect cluster. Or other times you can find all the bees dead on the bottom board. It just depends on what time of the year they died, whether it was cold or whether it was warm. It seems like if it was warmer out when they died, they'll end up on the bottom board. But if it was really, really cold out, they'll end up stuck to the side of the frame like this, and it'll look like they're still alive. But when you actually pull them apart, they don't move. The other thing is you can take sometimes the bees are in torpor, but even when bees are in torpor, they'll still move a little bit. These bees weren't moving. I looked at them for a few minutes, looking them over, taking pictures, and this hive was definitely dead. So. So any other questions? Hey, Jim, do you still feed pollen patties?
No, I haven't been.
I know some people did, but I know other people have quit. The hive beetles kind of really hurt the pollen patty scene because they're really, really attracted to the pollen patties. So. Okay, any questions? We've got a cold weekend coming up. After this, I think we're going to have another warm break. So if you get a chance, get out in your hives. If you want me to come over and take a look and help you try to figure out why your bees died, I'm more than happy to do that. I'll schedule a time to come over. We'll do a couple things. We'll take a look and see if we can figure it out. Even if your bees are 100% gone and you want to try to get an idea, I'll come over and take a look and we can see and figure out why they possibly left. It can be a number of different things. I've seen everything from queen failures to mites. I've seen mouse damage. Usually queen failures or mites are the number one reason for your hive being completely gone. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I appreciate everybody. Thanks for your time tonight. Anybody have anything else? Okay, next meeting is March 1st. That will be here at Fellowship of Faith in Rio Grande. It will be an in-person, but we will also broadcast via Zoom. So we'll be doing education. And then we'll also, like I said, we'll be meeting here at the church. And then we'll also be broadcasting it for those of you that aren't comfortable coming out or have health issues and don't want to come out. We will broadcast via Zoom, so we'll have it on both platforms. Tonight was a trial run, doing it here at the church. I think it went pretty well. We had a couple of hiccups with me trying to figure out the audio. I'm trying to use a better quality mic so that hopefully the audio sounds halfway decent. But next March 1st, 6:30 at Fellowship of Faith. Watch your email. I'll send out the information and the address, and we'll be meeting here in person. The first Monday of the month from here on out for the rest of the year, we'll be meeting in person. And I'm going to send out a kind of a schedule of to what we're going to be doing, because we'll be putting some hives out here, and some of our meetings will actually be out in the hives doing bee work. So I'll let you know when to bring your suits and stuff like that to be ready for bee work. Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks, guys and girls.
Observation, Chris. I would ditch
Yes,
the
sir.
microphone. You sound like Donald Duck.
That bad, huh?
Well, Sue asked who's doing the talking. That's got to give you a little hint.
All right. Okay, so Bruce and Corey, when we get off here, are you available for a quick 5-minute? I'll text you guys another Zoom link, and just quick 5 minutes. I just want to talk about a few things before our in-person meeting. So,
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, good.
okay, I appreciate it, guys. Everybody have a good weekend. I guess it's going to be cold and snowy, so get your snow shovels and your boots ready.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks,
Nice
Chris.
job, Chris.
See you. Thanks. Give me back the host.